Hey, how's it going, everybody? Um, looking real scruffy today again, but this is about Jesus versus Jesus and culture. I just got done watching. And I'll probably keep watching some more about this guy named Mike. I remember a coworker of mine, an older coworker of mine. He told me about that, like this guy, and I want to say he has a he's a part of this duo called Run the Jewels. Um, but yeah, I've seen like a video from like some family members and he shows like the importance of black of supporting black schools and just supporting their own culture. And so to me, this is it made me think because for me, I'm a big fan. I am a big fan of just supporting my own culture, attempting to at least having that mindset, and hopefully in the future, whenever I get some financial influence, even though it doesn't need to, it doesn't necessarily need to start with a financial influence. It could just be a social influence. Have everybody be on the same page. Have everybody care about each other. Not just care about each other when it's convenient for them, but just like say, hey, I care about my own people. This isn't anti people, anti other people, anti other. This is just like a love for our own culture. Now, another thing is I'm a Christian as well. And so one thing I have heard from people who were I can't say for everybody, but I have heard from people they say um, culture doesn't matter. It's just about Jesus. Now, for me, it made me wonder Jesus himself when he came down. One of the things he did, one of the things he was looking after was his own culture. He was looking after the Jews. Now you can say, well, no, Jesus died for everybody. Yes, that is true. But if you take into account, there's a scripture that has him talking about where there's this lady, she's begging, and he says, "Why should I give to dogs?" Now, what he's talking about is he's talking about the Gentiles. He's talking about people who are not his own, people um, who were Gentiles, who are not Jews. He says, um, and it's like at first, like the lady, she was sitting here begging, crying, pleading. She's like, "Jesus, help me, please, Jesus, help me." And he was silent. He ignored her. He says, "I'm not here for Gentiles. I'm here for my Jewish people." And and it's true. Like he was after them. But one of the things she did was continually, because she knew he was the Messiah, that he could perform miracles. She kept pleading, and he said, should I give crumbs to dogs?" So she says, even crumbs eat from the even dogs eat crumbs from the master's table or something like that. Like, should I give scraps to dogs? Should I feed things from my table to people who are not of the fold? And so he says she shows in her faith and persistence that I'll take anything. And he says, by your faith, you know, I'm gonna listen to you. And so he bases that he like the idea of Christ is that he says your faith will transcend your culture. But just because he did say that it doesn't transcend your culture, doesn't mean that people are just pro culture and nothing else. He says this isn't the basis of faith. So if it isn't the basis of faith, then it has to be in a sense universal. It has to be potentially universal because if anybody can get in through faith and believing in Christ, believing what he's done, believe what he said, then that extends through culture. Now getting back to it, um, there are particular cultures who care about their own, and they'll go as far as even to belief, schools of thought, to say, hey, this is a predominantly specific or specific that culture. This is a specific like confused. We don't trust Western religions. We trust Eastern religions. If we're like Chinese or something, we don't do that Christianity. Like, for instance, in China, they have a very strong cultural tie connection. There's some people over there who won't even celebrate Christmas because it's this Christianity. Even though they have like a church there, they won't practice it. They won't even practice Christianity being its full self by promoting itself among other people. It's just there. So church building or church building. I mean, the church actually doing what it's supposed to do. That is evangelize. That is spread out. Um, which is really ironic. But um, Jesus and Christianity is one of those belief systems that don't really play by the rules, by comparison to other systems. They don't. They spread it. It's because it's on the basis of faith. It's not really on the basis of like any particular culture. I've always said this is that Jesus and Christianity typically revitalizes a culture rather than replaces it. And I think that was one of the issues, especially with the Roman Catholic Church, is that they were out to they tied themselves to Christianity and and how we understand Roman Catholicism, where they spread Roman Catholicism and they spread their ways over other people's ways. And so there's this bad taste in their mouth that if Christianity comes over a people, it replaces it with the dominant people, the majority culture. Typically, I like to think European, where the value is, for some reason, for instance, poverty is a virtue. You know, you shouldn't have your mind set on earthly things. You can't take it with you when you die. Um, when Jesus himself, sorry, when Jesus himself, sorry about that, when Jesus himself said that get to see and give to God what is God's, after he gave the Roman inscription and he was supposed to pay taxes, and people who were in rebellion to the government, was it them or the Jewish people? I think it was the Jewish people. They were trying to get him confused. They were trying to fit him in a box, and to say to just try to figure him out. And they said, "Well, since you are the Messiah, um, should we pay taxes to Caesar or not?" And again, they were using these questions to tempt him, to trick him. And they say, "Hey, should we give taxes to Caesar?" And he says, "Give me what whose likeness is on this coin?" And he says, "Caesar's." And he says, or I can't remember. I think they gave him a coin, and he says, whose likeness is this?" And he says, "Oh, it's Caesar. The what is it? The patriarch? The Excuse me, the ruling patriarch at the time." And so he says, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give what to God is God's." And so it establishes, especially in broader culture, just like with the Babylonian takeover, is that they still within themselves have respect for a culture. They look at it and they acknowledge it, um, and that doesn't mean that they deny themselves in holiness. That doesn't mean that they override their own culture with the dominant culture. It's more so respecting the culture and still honoring Christ. Like for instance, and I mentioned this before, where in Recheg, Meshach, and Abednego, these were their new names for a new culture, new Babylonian culture, their Babylonian names. And so, and I'm pretty sure one of them was like Mishael and I forget the other ones, but like one of the things they did was that they had they didn't have a meat diet. They had a very vegetarian diet, and so they said, well, if you allow us to practice these laws, we'll serve you a lot better. And so one of the things they did, and so they allowed them to keep that part of their culture. It made them better at supporting the culture that they were serving under. So in American culture, well, I'm sorry, going back to Jesus, um, he also tells them that he came to fulfill the law, not to abolish it. So again, what Jesus does replace a culture. He shows them alternative, which is the way he follows, but he doesn't abolish a previous culture. And even for the apostles, they suggest like, hey, you can follow the other culture, because that was one of the issues they had. They were Jewish people, and they were forcing their past Jewish religion, Jewish culture on the new believers, the people of these new churches. And they say you can, but you have to abide by all of those rules. And it's like you can't have it both ways in terms of the cultural excellence, not cultural excellence, but more so just like the religious excellence. Just because you share culture doesn't mean that you can intertwine that same culture with the religion that is associated with that culture. You can't intertwine that and say Jesus is right alongside it. So if you support a culture, let's say animism, You can't, and just because it's attached to your culture doesn't mean you can attach to Christianity. As far as I can tell, I don't think that they mesh well or compatible. So but that doesn't mean, like for instance, it wasn't the Philippines. It was some sort of indigenous culture where, and they used to like have it. It was very war heavy, and they used to cut off the heads of their of the people they oppressed, people they took over, and they used that as like war trophies. And but ever since Christianity came in and invaded that country, I guess invasion is more of a rougher term, but they in a sense infiltrated, and it became the dominant religion culture after that. And so, not saying there's gonna be problems. Always gonna be issues. Just because of culture of religion takes over doesn't mean it's gonna be better. But it was definitely notably better because the war stopped. They learned about forgiveness. They learned about just giving a clean slate. And with blacks, I don't think is. I think it's a lot more complicated than that, because I'm like, these are is one thing to say, okay, we never knew about Jesus. We have a history of just of, of bruiser, of pain and things like that, and then Jesus comes through, redeems the culture, lets us know that we don't have to be living in bondage. American culture didn't do that. American culture actually used Christianity itself, at least what we understand, and used that to oppress us. So no wonder Christianity leaves a poor taste in our mouths, where it's like people who are like pro African American or just pro black culture, they want nothing to do with Christianity at all, because it was used as a tool of oppression. They said you are poor. I mean, yeah, they use these so-called virtues that's not even acknowledged in the Bible. Uh, being poor despite the dominating class, which was the church at the time, living in excellence. Something I personally don't understand, because that's something Jesus didn't live. He was a nomad. He had a place to stay, but he didn't have a place to continuously rest his head. Around, but it just didn't make sense to me. Like, I feel like just the effects of post like a number of different cultures and stuff, where there's just dogma. There's not really a lot of understanding for the culture itself. There's not even like, it's got lost in religion, and the religion that was made to be Roman Catholicism. And not to say it wasn't all bad, but it's like it leaves a poor taste in people's mouths, where people are just blindly following it, rather than like, I follow this because I've read, I've understood, I've seen its cultural significance and relevance in my own people and culture and area and nation. Um, but yeah, it makes me wonder about that. And so with blacks, it's a very, it's a poor relationship, and it's like, it's gonna be a hard case to just let people know, not just, culturally a different person comes in and tell people about Jesus. It's like, I mean, perhaps that might be it, where like a predominantly black neighborhood who have experienced Christianity is just in a poor streets. And but I it's strange, but I think perhaps they just need a pure form of Christianity to invade, but not only to invade or infiltrate these neighborhoods, but to have a open heart for understanding, understanding their culture, not replacing their culture, but perhaps in some parts to invade, and to just let it be known like there are better ways to go about these issues, and just really be very not pervasive, but just enter in and understand, and then seeing not so much from a cultural standpoint, but from a religious one, how can these places be infiltrated. Another issue is these intercultural differences. Um, I'm sorry, interpersonal cultural differences. Sorry. And by that I do mean like, for instance, two black people, one black person is sorry, like let's say two black people, one black person, a person who's within a culture, another person who's in a different culture. So let's say one person who's in inner city Chicago, and they meet another person from California, and and then they say you don't sound like me. They don't really know too much apart from where their environment is, and so they make assumptions. If you don't know, you assume. So they say you're not you're not like me, so you're not me. And so if they regard their culture as just truly black or just wholly black, and not just within their culture, apart from understanding black people from different cultures, they may say we're black and you're not black. And if it's typically whites, then it's like I'm black and you're white because you're not my culture. You have to be something else, and something else is just white and black. There's other cultures, but that's just apart from white and black. And so this is my general perception of it. I've been into an inner city before. Didn't interact heavily with the people there. I just kind of did what I needed to. Um, yeah, I wasn't out. I was really a homebody.
But
Excuse me, but it was like if people come to those conclusions, it's kind of hard to and they adopt certain practices and interact with them because it's like this assumption that blacks are monolith, and in a sense we kind of are. We have to be. We don't have a culture to tell us otherwise. To tell us that this is black culture, we have to stick to this, and it's like it's not. There's different. I mean, they have East Coast rap. Um, I don't even know East Coast, West Coast rap. They have even those ties, and these are black people. So it's like if they have rap preferences, rap differences of rap preference. I mean, what makes us think that culture just ain't different? That's a quick one. So it's like for us to sit here and suggest like black people are just one way, they talk one way, they act one way, need to be a lot more historically historically knowledgeable of our culture, to know like from the South and how the South moved to the North to try to find some sort of freedom, and then it's not like those cultural dialects die or disappear; they just become morph into something different. So it's like there's no to me there's no surprise that blacks sound like Southerners. Now, of course, you get to the different those inter those differences between the within the surrounding area, those differences. But it's like, of course, we came from the South. Of course, our dialect is gonna be, you know, of a certain way where we say Ebonics. It's like it's a post Southerner, uh, post slavery culture where we're just trying to grab to whatever that we have. Um, but yeah, in terms of Jesus, I don't. I it's bad because it's saddening to me because there's this assumption that Jesus represents white culture, and it's not. It's saddening that whites use at the at an earlier time could try to attach Christian culture to their own and suggest that everyone who wasn't the people of the America, which is kind of ironic because America wasn't even. It was claimed it founded on Christian principles, but it's like if that was, we probably still would have been under Britain until Britain let us go voluntarily, because according to the Bible itself, we're supposed to take care for our authorities, and we didn't do that. We didn't care about our authorities. We actually broke off from them. We emancipated ourselves from them. Emancipation Proclamation. So it's like is that a loophole perhaps, but at the same time I'm like it's not inherently Christian, and Christian is typically you have to submit under your authorities. That's a big one. So it's like you can't say we are not submitting under our authorities being Britain and have things like the Boston Tea Party and stuff like that, or the American Revolution, and then say slaves have to do the same thing. That doesn't make sense. Why should the slaves submit to American rule? And when people say that's just in the past, it's like To me, that's silly because there's always a trauma in the past that affects now. Like if kids are sexually assaulted, that's not gonna disappear when they grow up. So collectively speaking, as a people, I'm like those effects are not gonna disappear. It's gonna be there's gonna be some sort of lingering. And it's just like there needs to be a deeper discussion. You know, if for people who and another thing is racists don't aren't evil. Racists are ignorant. Racists can do ignorant things, rather foolish things. Um, even if it's like in sorry, even if it's in propensity to their own selves, I don't think they're evil. Because like think about it. If someone was racist, if I was racist, does that mean I'm going to be evil toward my own kind? Probably not. But does that mean I'm going to be like particularly bitter, particularly angry toward people of another group? Probably. So for me, every time I hear about people saying like, it wasn't that bad, and I'm like, well, perhaps it was, and you didn't see it, you didn't experience it. I'm like, you think racists, if your great granddaddy were gonna be racist toward people who are not your color, that he's gonna let you see it? You think he's gonna be racist toward you when you're super young and you're like a lad or lass? You just sit there. No, he's gonna treat you very nice. Of course, your grandfather's gonna be nice. Um, and I've seen from different parts where people are integrated and older people who were once racist, they break their racism because they see a child who's a mixed child, and they aren't full white, but they're so young and so clueless about racism that they accept their racist grandparents with with no hesitancy because they're a child. They don't know anything. They don't know a thing about racism. They just are have unconditional love, from what I can understand, and they just reach out to him and they say, grandpa, and then for them, the racists, they're like, whoa, this is kind of strange